Want to let people in?
I can't do anything. There we go. Thank you. I will admit all. Okay, here we go.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to get started in just a moment as we wait for some more people to join from the waiting room. In the meantime, if you could make sure that you put yourself on mute, that would be great. Thank you so much. Well, thank you again to everyone for joining us this afternoon for our webinar on emergency rental assistance programs and updates in Massachusetts. My name is Eric Shupin. I'm the Director of Public Policy here at Citizens Housing and Planning Association, and I look forward to a really great webinar. Just a few quick housekeeping things before we get started, and I turn it over to our host for today is Chris Norris. But I just wanted to mention that this webinar is expected to run through about 2:30 this afternoon. If you could please keep yourself muted during the program, that would be very much appreciated. Any questions or comments that you might have, please feel free to put them into the chat, and panelists and participants will get to as many questions as time permits, but we'll be going through those chats to pull those questions from there. The speaker bios for today's program is available on our event webpage, and we'll post that into the chat box for you to have, and you can access all of that information there. Finally, I just wanted to say that this meeting is being recorded and that it will be made available after this event on our Chapo YouTube page, and we'll make sure that we can send that around to everyone. So with that, I wanted to say thank you again for joining us, and I will turn it over to Chris.
Thank you very much, Eric. I appreciate that. I am a CHAPA board member and chair of CHAPA's Rental Assistance Committee. And on behalf of CHAPA, I want to welcome you to the Emergency Rental Assistance Update. I also want to thank Carol, Rachel, and Eric, and in fact, everyone at CHAPA for hosting the forum today. A lot of things have happened since March of 2020. But one of those was not the beginning of housing challenges in Massachusetts. For quite some time, we have been near the top of the list for housing costs. Specifically for households with extremely low incomes, our friends at the Mass Housing Partnership found back in 2019 that 250,000 Massachusetts households were spending more than 50% of their income on housing and not receiving assistance. There were years-long waits to reach the top of wait lists for a housing choice voucher, or in some cases for public housing. CHAPA's own report with the Federal Reserve, which was also supported by findings from the National Low-Income Housing Coalition, found that we only had one available and affordable unit for every 2 households with extremely low incomes. All of this existed before the pandemic. However, the pandemic and the response to it provided us with opportunities. Increased awareness of housing challenges as more people were impacted, clarity that high density is not the same as overcrowding, and that families and seniors in affordable housing are often safer and healthier than those without it. A chance to modernize our systems, electronic forms and signatures, while maintaining access for folks who don't have those tools. And flexibility, different ways of verifying income and housing crises. And of course, the reason we're here today, funding. Prior to March of 2020, I don't think many of us would have gone into a congressional office and asked for an emergency rental assistance program to pay 12 months of rental arrears with no cap, but we have it now. We might have hesitated to ask for payments to be made directly to households, but guidance from Treasury last week now requires it. During the discussion today, you'll hear from some of my colleagues, partners, and friends about what has been and is happening. I'll finish with some quick numbers so we can get to the program, and I know that the speakers will expand upon these. Statewide, our emergency rental assistance programs have served more than 25,000 households with a total of $133 million since the start of the pandemic. Just at Metro Housing, our emergency financial assistance team has grown from 11 staff members to 75. To put the funds distributed in perspective, during the 12 months of fiscal year 20, Metro Housing distributed $5.1 million. During the 7 days leading up to May 1st of this year, 7 days, 1 week, Metro Housing distributed $5.5 million. It hasn't always been easy, but our first speaker and her team at DHCD have been there with us every step of the way, working to improve and streamline the application process. And like we have done for over many years when it comes to affordable housing, Massachusetts is setting the standard and leading the way nationally. So again, I want to thank CHAPA for hosting today, the 223 people that are here so far with others still joining. And now it is my pleasure to introduce someone who really needs no introduction to this group, Department of Housing and Community Development Undersecretary Jennifer Maddox.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Eric, and thank you, Chris, for opening up today's forum. And thank you for CHAPA for creating this venue for us to discuss the issues that keep us all up at night and how to keep our families housed and prevent as many evictions as possible. The past year, we have transformed how we provide housing assistance, created entirely new programs, expanded others, and continue to refine a larger strategy for eviction prevention. We have done this in response to and under the restrictions of the COVID-19 pandemic, which saw our governor and federal government take a variety of extraordinary actions, like our state moratorium on evictions and the CDC eviction protections. COVID-19 held Massachusetts in a state of fear for over a year, and it's only in the last month we have really started to feel a difference as more people are fully vaccinated. Most companies are still in the process of returning to offices as normal, and schools are just now returning for full-time in-person classes. Of course, DHCD continues to work remotely. Unfortunately, I think we are all well aware that we have a very long way to go from small, maskless indoor gatherings to full economic activity. This is especially true for so many Massachusetts households, depending on hourly and often low-wage service industry jobs for employment. Our work is not done, and we are well aware that for the next 4 months are very important in our work to help residents maintain housing stability. Now, I know there are a lot of questions about what the most recent judicial decisions mean for the federal CDC protections, and we aren't yet entirely sure how courts across the country will interpret them. Massachusetts is not a perfect state, but we are in a much better position to manage an adverse court decision. The CDC protections and the Chapter 257 protections enacted by our legislature have been an important factor in eviction rates and executions. But our focus has always been on delivering services to keep households out of the eviction process entirely. I also know that there are a lot of questions about last week's Treasury guidance, and I'm sure many of you were hoping to hear something else. But the truth is that we are still digesting the guidance as well. Our goal is to get federal funding out efficiently and effectively to the thousands of households who need it. And we are looking forward to exploring the new tools this guidance includes. I'm looking forward to today's panel discussion with the leaders of 2 of our regional agencies who have been an integral part of our work over the last year to administer housing assistance in such large quantities. I cannot overstate how different our financial assistance program is from just a year ago. As many of you know, our ERAP program had served about 5,000 to 6,000 low-income households a year with a budget of roughly $20 million. For the most part, families visited their regional agency in person with their paperwork and met with a staff member to fill out the application. We had a very low rejection rate. Most households were referred to the program by local service providers, and eligibility was narrow. The program was really a homelessness prevention program, not a true rental assistance program. The aim was to cover 1, maybe 2 months of rent, help a family move, or keep their landlord at bay. It was not for the long-term help this pandemic necessitated. Today, we have a rental assistance program that is processing thousands of applications a month. And we can provide a year of rental arrears and stipends for future rent. And it's being done entirely online. Since March 2020, we've distributed 136 million. Let me repeat that again, 136 million, and helped over 25,000 households. Just in April, we distributed more than 28 million. In March, 33 million, and 22 million in February. And I know we're on track for another month of strong numbers. We've done this through a lot of hard work and a lot of hard conversations and many, many PowerPoints. All of this, of course, over Microsoft Teams and Zoom with 11 regional agencies who have themselves all transitioned to remote work. I am sure Stefanie will go further into the numbers and the challenges we took on to get to this point during her panel. I want to acknowledge that it hasn't been easy, and we greatly appreciate the cooperation, the flexibility, and commitment by hundreds of individuals to get us here. I know my own staff has heard me say this, but this pandemic has presented us with the reality that failure is simply not an option. We now have a much stronger program and continue to improve our own data collection so we can better understand our application pipeline. Now, we are able to dig into better data and learn. For instance, that just 6% of applications are rejected because the landlord refused to participate or is unresponsive to agency outreach. Additionally, we have rolled out new tools and are working on a new campaign to address the more than 80% of applications that are incomplete upon submission. Today, we are really thrilled to be operating at a level where we are confident in hitting federal deadlines for distributing funding, preventing any of our award being reclaimed. This pandemic also opened vital communication lines to our partners at district and housing courts, in the legal aid community, and among more local organizations who share our goal to prevent housing instability. Our conversations and collaboration resulted in state funding for legal aid, expanded funding and outreach for vulnerable communities, new mediation services, and new staff at DHD and partners to do it. When you look across our agencies, our regional administrating agencies, and legal aid organizations, our Eviction Diversion Initiative hired about 500 people. I know some of those hires will be temporary, but I share that to highlight our commitment to increasing capacity to address this crisis. And we've been trying new things: highway signs, MBTA signs, Facebook, Instagram ads, virtual town halls, door knocking, signs on kiosk. And we're seeing, it's really working. And we know we're making progress on getting resources to all vulnerable households. Will require a continued attention and work. We continue to look for new ways to get information in more languages, get information to local leaders and organizations, and help people navigate a confusing system. We have a chance to provide families with many months of housing stability, and we are eager to distribute federal aid and give people breathing room. I know I often say this, but I am truly grateful to live in Massachusetts. We have an incredible ecosystem of stakeholders invested in housing stability, in affordable housing, and in our low-income communities. I'm incredibly proud of the leadership shown by my own administration, including our commitment of $100 million last fall, and our collective ability to meet this moment. Last fall, Mass Housing and CHAPA coordinated an eviction diversion pledge, with more than 70 property owners representing about 150,000 housing units. Today, you will hear more about the SHERA program for our major affordable housers. Many have spent a great deal of time and money to keep residents safe and healthy during this crisis. I want to close with one message. There is more money available. Please, please let your constituents, clients, and neighbors know that we can continue to help them pay rent, even if they've received funding already. I don't want to return any of those precious federal funds. Thank you for letting me participate in today's forum.
Thank you very much, Undersecretary Maddox. The next person I want to introduce is relatively new to this arena. In fact, I had the privilege to serve on the interview team that hired her as the executive director of the Regional Housing Network. She was hired in March of 2020, and nothing quite says welcome as letting your new executive director know that the office is closed, that it's budget season and there are many housing priorities, and that the ground is going to shift under her feet for the next 14 months. However, Stefanie hit that ground running and has become a familiar and trusted face, advisor, and leader for the network and for all of us. Stefanie Coxe, Executive Director of the Regional Housing Network, and she will introduce the panel.
Thank you so much, Chris. That is true. That has been my intro year to the Regional Housing Network. It's been a whirlwind, but I feel like we have really achieved a lot. And just for those of you who may not be familiar with the Regional Housing Network, we're a trade association representing all the regional nonprofits that administer not only RAFT and ERAP, the emergency rental and mortgage assistance programs, but also the long-term rental assistance programs such as MRVP, Section 8, and our members also operate the Housing Consumer Education Centers, which are essentially the housing emergency rooms, which so many of the residents of the Commonwealth are going to in terms of figuring out not only how do I apply for RAFT or ERAP, but also how do I get into long-term housing? How do I, get in contact with legal aid or mediation? So we're really very grateful for the opportunity to be able to serve the community as we've been able to. And we've been working very closely with our members like Chris, as well as Keith and Rob, who I'll introduce in a moment, along with our other panelist, Taylor Cain, and hand in hand with our colleagues at DHCD to respond to this incredible need. And as the Undersecretary said, right on, we've taken a paper-only program that used to serve, 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 households, and transformed it into a full-fledged disaster relief program that served just over 7,000 households just last week. So the rate of spending is higher, it's faster, it's increasing, wait times have steadily decreased, and now we have a lot more resources to work with. And also say, from the RHN perspective that, when it comes to sort of the global policy concerns, processing concerns, what have you, we've really tried to listen to what people have brought to us either through CHAPA or through other means, and listen and respond and work with our colleagues at DHCD to improve the process. So I'll just take a quick moment to share my screen and let you all just see, if you haven't already, this is just a great resource. The Commonwealth that the administration has put together on this dashboard that shows you, all the different programs, and now just as of this morning, updated it to include all of the different sources of funding. So if you look at the rental assistance programs tab, you can see where we've got ERAP, we've got the emergency rental assistance program. I'll be referring to that, and we are full of acronyms. If you don't know what it means, feel free to put it in the chat. But ERAP, RAFT, and IRMA, which was also funded with some federal funds last year. So you can see combined all of these put together and the progress that we've made just over the last few months. Back in December, our numbers were we didn't have as many staff. We needed to change around the admin plan to kind of respond to the dramatic need. And once we did that, we started doubling numbers over and over again. We got some extra helping hands from the ERAP Center in February. And again, just improving these numbers overall, which we hope that your constituents are seeing. And so I'll let you know, as you can see, some of the numbers, these don't reflect the last week, but the numbers are just truly astounding. So I'm just gonna stop my share. Sorry. And we've really taken it from an average of 1,300 households a month in December to over 9,000 a month in March and April. And for an average of 4,000 a month in December to 30,000. I'm sorry, 30 million, 4 million a month to 30 million. So it's really just sort of skyrocketing. And I say all this to illustrate that the program that you knew, again, I just want to emphasize what the Undersecretary said, that the program you knew 6 months or a year ago is not the same program. So if you're thinking in terms of the same sets of rules or expectations, I think one of the takeaways I'd love for everyone to have here is that it's best to assume this is a totally different program and ask, because there are so many different changes and so many different resources than there were 6 months or even 3 months ago. And we also encourage you to check out DHCD's trainings on ERAP. They've got a really robust website, and I think one of the folks in charge of kind of all the PR stuff from DHCD is on the call. Maybe she can throw some of the links in the chat. So the good news is that we have the infrastructure in place now to adapt more than we did when the moratorium ended, and we have more resources. And when that's all done, though, which at one point it certainly will be, we're still going to need RAFT. We're still going to need an emergency pipeline for folks who are in need not due to COVID. So we also need everyone's collective advocacy for RAFT, so it remains a key and improved tool in our toolkit when the pandemic is gone. So now I'm going to introduce our panel. Keith Fairey became the CEO of Wayfinders, also rather hitting the ground in a pretty crazy time. The CEO of Wayfinders in Springfield back in the summer. He's definitely hit the ground running using his skills from working for the enterprise housing nonprofit in DC to grow his team and to respond to high rates of eviction filings in Springfield. He's been a terrific addition to our board. Rob Corley is the CEO of NeighborWorks Housing Solutions, serving the South Coast, South Shore. And Rob's been part of one of the things that we changed sort of in response to the constant demand and needs was to have a way to have a little mini think tank with DHCD. We call it our small group. And he's been part of that so we can think through what are the operational implications of policies before they get created. So Rob's been a terrific addition to that. And then Taylor Cain is the director of the Mayor's Housing Initiative Innovation in the city of Boston. And over the past year has turned the lab's focus on renter equity into a deeper immersion into the realm of housing assistance, rental assistance. And working in close collaboration with the Boston Office of Housing Stability, Taylor has brought a lens of exploration and experimentation to the operations of the City of Boston's Rental Relief Fund. So thanks everyone for joining us. Welcome. I want to start off with Keith and Rob just to start. We've seen some really big changes as we've discussed with RAFT. We've had new hires, now ERAP. How has all of that impacted your ability to process and distribute emergency housing? And just in your own words, how have you seen the ability to sort of triple funds since January work out in your everyday lives?
Sure. I'll jump in. Rob will continue to color in the picture, I'm sure, quite well. Out here in Western Massachusetts, we cover Hampden and Hampshire County, including the city of Springfield, the third largest in the Commonwealth. And we've seen the program really changed over time to help us meet the significant demand in our region. We get about 400 applications a week. In the early days when the Eviction Diversion Initiative was being stood up, and as you were describing the pipeline there and how it changed so dramatically for us to be able to serve more folks, we were overwhelmed with applications, and we worked closely with the HCD. They brought in capacity, as you mentioned, to help us. They brought in kind of technical expertise to help us think about how to set up our processes differently and really begin to work within our teams differently. But the other thing that we did, and we'll talk more about this I know later, is look to partnerships and engagements with others in the community. And that really helped us really begin to turn the tide in the way that we have in terms of being able to get resources out and deploy them much more effectively. That change to the administrative plan back in January was very significant, allowing us to be much more efficient and effective. And then we built capacity along the way. When I started back in July of 2020, we had 6 employees who were focused on our RAF program. Today, we're close to 60, and we'll probably by the end of the summer, be closer to 70. We continue to build capacity and strengthen our capacity to do more as the pandemic persists and as people still have great need in our community.
Yeah, I'll just add, thank you. Good to see everybody, or maybe you can see me, I can't see you, and thanks for having me. I think for us, it was also everything that Keith said and that's been said prior. But for us, it was also, we really had to transition from what RAFT was to a disaster relief mentality. This is a totally different type of program. And I think we were all sort of learning on the fly how we would transition a regular, as was mentioned, a homeless prevention program into a disaster relief program. And then on top of that, all of the volume that was coming in, and we were trying to change this as we went. And as all the different types of funding have come in and been overlaid, it's been a challenge. I think our staff has always taken a sort of family and household first approach. And again, in this case, the landlords were also in crisis. So it's very important to sort of put yourself in their shoes to understand how they're getting through this bureaucracy when they just desperately need assistance as soon as possible, especially after the moratorium was lifted. So again, staffing up and getting to a point with our partners where we could handle this was critical. And I just have to say that our staff and the staff of all of the regionals are just been incredible during this period of time. I mean, the amount of energy and time and nights and weekends that they've put into this work and trying to help families has been just tremendous. It's really taken all of us across the state to make this work and to ramp this up over the last several months.
Yeah, and I'd say that extends to the executive directors and also to DHCD staff, who I exchanged many emails and phone calls with over weekends as we were building this up. I want to bring Taylor into this and talk a little bit about the differences between the state programs and more locally controlled funds, such as the City of Boston. I think that's probably the biggest one. So I'd love to give Taylor a moment to just sort of talk a little bit about the scope of that, what some of the differences are, and then maybe Rob or Keith can pipe in about some other municipal programs that they might be administering.
Yeah, happy to be here with y'all this afternoon, and want to start by saying that in a lot of ways there are many similarities in terms of the parameters for the City of Boston's fund and the state's program, and that is in very much a reflection of the close coordination and collaboration that has happened over the past several months. There are definitely regular meetings between the City of Boston and the incredible folks at DHCD. But definitely sharing similarities around this focus on back rent, current rent, this future stipend, the ability to provide additional months of assistance and the utility assistance as well. And then I think where there are additional similarities is this really creative use of leveraging existing partnerships. So for the City of Boston, what we've been able to do over the past 12 months is really deepen our relationships with organizations like Metro Housing, Project Hope, and the Neighborhood of Affordable Housing to really be our key partners in getting this rental assistance out the door to tenants and landlords who are in desperate need of this resource. But in terms of where some of the differences are, what I'll really highlight is that in the city, what we've really tried to do, in addition, resonates with the state as well. We've really created new systems and new processes. So thinking about our online tools that we've created for our application form, we've really tried to stress meeting people where they are, that being really important. So training community groups on how to help folks apply for assistance and really building a pipeline and network of folks that can really be an advocate in terms of getting the information out the door, but also being an advocate in terms of helping folks move through the process. And then we've also really stepped up our communication with landlords as well as tenants, and really trying to get folks as early in the process as possible. So we are constantly trying, learning, and then trying some more when it comes to this process, and making sure that we're really prioritizing language access and technology access. So ensuring that all of our materials are available in multiple different languages, that everything is both laptop friendly, but especially mobile device friendly, and experimenting with things like text messages. But I think the part that's really most important is understanding who we're serving. So at the City of Boston, what our typical applicant really looks like for rental assistance is a household that's making around $23,000 a year, is paying around $1,500 in rent. And for our applicants, what we're typically seeing is that folks owe on average around $3,800 in rent. What we're also seeing is that most of the folks who applied for the City of Boston's fund, over 40% had reported that their employer had reduced or shut down operations. About 40% had reported some type of loss of income due to childcare, school closures, or increased childcare expenses. And then the kind of pieces I want to end with is over 70% of our applicants identified as BIPOC households, so Black, Indigenous, people of color, and over 69% of our applicants identified as female. So there's a really interesting kind of lens to hold in this conversation around how we're thinking about racial equity and gender equity, and how our response in terms of these programs is both meeting an immediate need, but really highlighting these underlying systemic issues that existed long before these programs were stood up.
Yeah, I'll just add a little about some of the local programs that we were partnering with in cities like Brockton and Weymouth. We were able to, especially early on when there was caps on the amount of assistance we could provide, we were seeing just huge numbers in arrears, and we were able to sort of dovetail the existing state funding with those local sources to really help a family that was in crisis. In addition, some of the resources locally that weren't used with federal funds like CDBG and others through the United Way and other private funds, we were able to provide assistance for funerals and other costs that wouldn't typically be part of the RAF program. So there was a lot of in utilities to a further extent back then that weren't necessarily available like they are now. So when there was caps in place and restrictions in the existing program, we were able to use those local programs in a lot of municipalities to sort of match it up with the state's funding.
Yeah, and I've just to echo that, we have the same experience working in the city of Springfield. Early on, the Sarno administration made funding available, knowing that there was going to be a high need for their community, and we worked closely with them throughout, actually even adding to their resources, being able to couple it with when we had caps, as Rob was talking about, to really meet the needs of folks. And I appreciate Taylor bringing out some of the demographics there of the applicants for the city of Boston. We see similar data in terms of what we're seeing in our region. Majority applicants, not quite as high, but closer to in mid 50s to 60%, depending on where in our region, our households of color, and majority women as primary applicants for the program. So it calls out, again, existing issues that we're coming to the pandemic with around cost burdens, housing crisis, who's impacted in terms of communities of color in particular. We just completed a housing study that showed the high rates of cost burdens. 1 in 4 households in our region paying more than 50% of their income for housing costs, and that was pre-pandemic. So, and we see in the application volume and the notice to quits and the eviction filings, again, we're outsized for our region, for our population, I should say, in our region. We're collectively in our 2 counties, we have almost 10% of the population of the state of Massachusetts. And on most weeks, when we meet together as the regional administering agencies, we are in the top 2 in terms of the number of applications being received. So just to give you a sense of impact of the pandemic crisis in our region is quite severe. And this has been critical. This has been a critical resource to really keep people stably housed. We have not seen massive evictions because of the collaboration and the work that all the administrative agencies have done. And in our region, that has been the case with we're around $23 million, all resources out the door right now to stabilize families and to stabilize the economy, as well as mentioned before, to support the landlords and others has been critical to economic stability as well as housing stability in our region.
Thank you all. And I apologize, I have a sleeping dog in the background, so if anyone hears snoring, that's what it is.
I thought it was just my comments from
Not at all. So actually, I heard a couple things. Taylor mentioned relationships. I think, Keith, you mentioned kind of like staffing up. Rob, I think you mentioned partnerships. Could y'all just talk about how you serve such an expansive regions, and what, if any, kind of partnerships or staffing up you've needed to do to kind of manage this pandemic level of volume?
Yeah, so we've, as I think even Chris alluded to in the beginning, is that we're sort of blessed in the state with an incredible housing ecosystem, and I'd say it's arguably one of the best in the country. From the nonprofit sector to all the municipalities, the private sector, the state. We have wonderful partnerships, existing partnerships, and before the pandemic especially, and then all the alphabet soup here, right? With CHAPA having this forum, MACDC, RHN, the quasi-publics, Mass Housing, MHP. It's really taken all of us together, to stand up a eviction diversion, initiative. And literally, as was alluded to before, hundreds of Zoom meetings. I think communication has been key. And they often say that you can never over communicate, but I think we've really tested that theory over the last year. It's been incredible, the amount of meetings and discussions we've had. But we're also very lucky in the state to have programs like RAFT that we could build on. And in particular, our HCEC program, which is the Housing Consumer Education Centers that are across the state, and they were started over 20 years ago, and provide a foundation and a network of housing partnership across our region. And again, this is a long-standing network that we were able to tap and use to staff up and reach as many households as we have. In fact, HCEC has been used in the past for other disasters, including the tornadoes in Springfield, Keith, years ago, and other things. So it's just a critical resource, and it's really a network of all our partner organizations. And when people come to us for assistance or they have a housing situation, we have that network. If we can't help them, we know who can. And in this case, without that network, and we had to go a lot deeper with a lot of our partners, in particular, when we go from 4 staff doing $1 million a year in RAFT to doing about 400 households in a year. And we're now doing that in a week, every week, and have been doing that since January. We needed an incredible expansion of our staff, but also our partners in that deeper partnership. So it's organizations like PACE, Sir Jobs, CEDC, Pro Homes, BAMSI, the Cape Verdean Association. We're really, really grateful for those partnerships that we had, and they're helping us process and bring in applicants, and with outreach and everything across the region. Without them, this would have been impossible. And also want to thank the United Way and NeighborWorks America actually providing us funding early on to staff up to the level that we really needed. And lastly, I'll say that we've also been trying to communicate ourselves better in the region. We've been doing quarterly forums. We've done 4 very well attended forums to keep everybody informed as all these changes were taking place, as the program sort of adapted and changed and new federal sources came in and so on. It was critical that we keep everybody informed of what was going on at all times. And again, I got to say, our staff was just incredible during this period of time to cover such a huge region and so many people that were in desperate need. And it continues. We're still seeing that volume every single week. It has not stopped.
Yeah, and just ending where Rob, beginning where Rob took off there, is in terms of the staff, the adaptability and flexibility of the staff to be able to ride the wave of the changes that have taken place over time has been really incredible to see. Yes, we added people. Yes, we have more money, but it's the folks every day who are answering the phone, processing the applications, who are making the difference, and being able to not only roll with the changes but embrace the change and get the resources out there. It's been humbling actually for me to see what people have been putting on the line to make this work for our clients and communities. So I more than echo what Rob is saying there. And for us, along many of the same lines, building on existing partnerships, but also embracing some of the new things like the EDI, the overall Eviction Diversion Initiative kind of team that we work along with every day and then meet with on a monthly basis, along with our regional CAP agencies, to keep everybody kind of informed, working on solutions for problems, seeing how we can leverage resources and capacity in our region is something that we continue to do. We also did a lot of outreach that we've never done before. We did PSAs on TV. We did billboards in our region. This is before the state did some of these things. We were doing them ourselves. We've used social media to advertise and reach different communities. And we can continue to look at those opportunities to reach more and more people, because one of the things that's unique about the pandemic compared to where we were before, this is reaching all new levels of people in need. We have the folks who, many low-income folks who were familiar with the program, our communities who knew about the program, but there are new communities who needed to be reached. And so we knew that we had to do something different than what we had done previously. And so through the support of our local community foundation, the Western Mass Community Foundation, they were able to give us some resources so we could do much more of that targeted outreach, and then more broad outreach in the way I was just talking about. We also really work closely with our local elected officials, from our state reps and senators and mayors and town councils, and not only just updating them, but also doing trainings for them. They get lots of constituents coming to them. And so we did briefings early on and continue to as a regular part of the work that I do, continue to kind of update them on how things are going and what changes and what opportunities there are to do more. School systems have also been a good partner for us as well. Even though they were remote, they have staff who look to address issues like homelessness and other issues that come into the school systems. And so we continue to work on making those connections and training folks there. And it is a continuous effort. This is not something it's not a kind of a one and done activity, but a continuous effort in the way Rob was talking about his meetings on a quarterly basis. We're doing similar things and then looking for new opportunities, turning over every stone in terms of connecting with partners, and both the usual partners and then new partners where we see an opportunity to reach more people and have them learn more about the program. And then finally, for us with landlords, having lots of different types of communications with landlords to keep them updated on program changes, so that they are not, kind of either dragging their heels or pushing back on the program, but really seeing this as a resource to support and help them to ensure housing stability for so many people and needing to keep their buildings operating in a satisfactory way. So we've done a lot of outreach and engagement with landlords, and continue to try to provide tools and capacities to make it easy for them to participate.
That's great. You both cover a lot around communication, and also want to just sort of amplify what Undersecretary Maddox mentioned as well about communications outreach that the administration is doing in terms of getting the word out to folks who are already on certain state programs, and billboards and sort of everything to kind of really get the word out. Taylor, I'd like to bring you in as well and just ask any kind of communications outreach that you all are doing with the city of Boston. And then I think the other thing I just want to ask kind of under the umbrella of communications is I saw a question in the chat that if one of our AAEDs could answer is just about how folks are getting notified as their application makes its way through the process. That'd be another communications question.
Yeah, so can get us started, and was going to say that for us, we definitely see communication as kind of having two pathways. There's the communication about what the program is, how do you apply, what are the eligibility criteria, and then there's the communication around, well, how do you move through the process from start to finish, and what are the different touch points that we need with folks throughout that process. So kind of on the first pathway, a lot of the things that folks have already said around different communication channels are certainly pieces that we're embracing as well. So thinking about connections with the Boston Public School System as kind of a key trusted partner that households in Boston receive information through. So really thinking about who are those key community partners at multiple different levels. So thinking about other city departments, thinking about community-based organizations, and then also from there transitioning into what are the different news and media outlets that folks in different communities are utilizing, really paying particular attention to media outlets and newspapers that are in languages other than English to this dimension around the language access component. Definitely utilizing outreach and messaging at public transportation or sites of public transportation, so bus shelters, thinking about T stations, and also really, again, meeting people where they are. So in the city of Boston, the Boston Center for Youth and Families, the Boston Public Library, again, BPS, there are spaces where folks are going to pick up or access other types of resources. So can that be another touch point where folks are also receiving information about rental assistance? And then there's kind of a whole bucket of outreach around notification to landlords, specifically thinking about smaller property owners, and you working with our inspectional service department to do kind of much broader mailings to small property owners in Boston to make sure that they know about this resource and that it is available for them if they have tenants who are really struggling to pay rent. And then on that other track, some of those pieces that I just talked about do apply in terms of helping folks understand what they need to move through the entire process. But we're also starting to work out how can we really partner with different community groups and organizations to really help coach people to understand what a full application packet looks like, and really making sure that when we get that information that it is as complete as possible, because that really helps with the processing time to be able to move from start to finish. It is a much faster process if we have a completed application with all of the information from the tenant as well as the landlord. And so for us, there's one area we can think about in terms of how do we make that application process easier. And then there's just piece around how can we help train and educate other folks to understand what do they need for a full application.
Then Keith or Rob, do you want to just talk a little bit about just communicating where folks are, and also maybe what people can do just to make sure, building on what Taylor was talking about, having complete applications, how that can help them speeding up the process.
Yeah, I'll just jump in here, Keith, real quick. For us on the application process, it's really the communication starts right at the point of application and really continues throughout the sort of process there. as you know, as this has evolved, the application process has been simplified, or we've been constantly trying to improve it. That's been a work in progress and continues to be. Actually, we're constantly trying to adapt and change it so it's easier for people. But again, we still have to underwrite people to a certain standard, and this takes time. And it also takes the transfer often of documents back and forth. So there is constant communication back and forth with the applicant through the application process to get them through as quickly as possible. Keith, you want to add more?
Yeah, no, I would just echo that and say that the constant flow of communication is right. And there is both electronic communication that comes out from the systems that we use to communicate with our applicants. And then there is also the fact that we actually, if we see deficiencies in applications or other things, we're actually going to pursue folks to try to get that information from them. So we take a proactive stance. We just don't sit back and say, well, this one's incomplete, we'll put it to the side. We're actually, kind of chasing the applicant for a period of time to really get them to complete the applications. And we'll do the same thing with landlords. To really try to get to the finish line with folks. And that's, again, kudos to our staff to adopting to that kind of approach where, again, as you described this, Stefanie, used to be walk in the door, fill out the application. Now it's a much more expansive approach where we're really we're using technology, but it is not a cold technological interface and that's it. If we need to get other things from people, we're actually reaching out to them, engaging them, and trying to really get them the support that they're asking for as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and there's thousands of people that we've seen that have never participated in any program like this before. So the getting, in particular, small landlords in our gateway cities that really, somewhat struggle to understand exactly what is going on with this program and what it means for them. So the communication has been key.
Great. Well, turning to ERAP, and also, including the city funds here, that I know there's a pre-existing city fund, but now there's certainly more. As those of us who work in this space every day know, ERAP still serves the same income limits as RAFT and IRMA combined previously did. So we're still serving the same general population of 80% of area median income. That's folks who have already after they lost their income, not what it was before, just to be clear about that. So what does this mean in terms of this new funding and how you can serve people in your region? Can you give me an example of a type of client situation that maybe you wouldn't have been able to serve previously that you can now that ERAP is in play?
A quick one, I would say, again, the ability to provide a lot more assistance for utilities was a big one here with ERAP, and just the flexibility, being able to go back to arrears 12 months and no cap on the amount of funding that someone can qualify for. So having it shift to being more time focused made a lot of sense, especially when there was caps on rent before. Depending on what your rent is in your region, those caps, didn't, they sort of affected your situation differently. It wasn't equitable. So now where there's no cap and you focus more on time, it works a lot better, and it sort of expanded the ability to help people in higher cost markets for a period of time and go back 12 months. And then really expanding sort of the stipend part of this and being able to look forward, because again, especially over the last several months where, it was clear that people aren't getting back to work, having the ability to provide a stipend for the months ahead so they don't have to come back in line for additional funding. So those changes they just changed everything, really. It really expanded the program tremendously and allowed us to sort of ramp up to a level where we're really helping people, not just with what has happened, but providing that bridge going forward here until we get back, hopefully, to some form of recovery here where people can get back to work.
I would just double underline all of what Rob said, but especially the part about the not being capped on amount. Even in here out in Western Massachusetts, thought of as a more affordable housing market, people are, as I mentioned before, really really stressed by the pandemic economically. And so we're seeing a significant number of households coming in over that, what was the previous threshold of $10,000. Previously we couldn't provide that assistance unless we could couple it with some of the municipal programs and other things, as we were mentioning before. So this really allows us to get to really kind of solving their arrears challenge, and to Rob's point, helping them in the months ahead as well. So that's been a huge change that has allowed us to help more people more effectively.
Yeah, if I could triple underline what's already been said, I would. Definitely this piece around the increased assistance and this ability to help folks moving forward. What we're seeing in the city of Boston, the numbers that we really pay close attention to, is about 50% of our applicants have reported that they have unpaid rent that they are able to pay. And then we have about 30% of applicants who say that they've been able to pay rent, but report facing future hardship. So really being able to serve both of those groups, really expanding who's able to receive rental assistance, has been kind of a key piece for us. And additionally, this increased amount of assistance, this flexibility around utility assistance. And then to this point that's been raised around how this has been an entry point for folks who had previously not received any type of housing assistance or rental assistance. For the city of Boston, it's become a really helpful point of entry to then connect them with other resources. So thinking just about, yes, the rental assistance, but also food resources. How can we help with credit repair? How can we connect with energy efficiency or weatherization programs? So really kind of taking this as a first step to really think about longer term stability in a more broader sense.
I'll just add one more thing, Stefanie, if I could. All excellent points. The other part here about this program is that before, landlords, especially small landlords, were in some cases forced to take less than what they were owed, and as if it was their fault that this situation had occurred. And the expansion of this on time and being able to go that far back in arrears and forward also sort of brought more landlords to the table here in working with tenants to sort of get through this process, because again, this isn't your traditional situation here where someone's being evicted. This is a crisis for everybody involved, and the expansion of this program and the federal funding allowed us to also hold landlords harmless.
Great, thank you. Well, I think this is a good point for us to turn to some questions from the audience. Our colleagues at CHAPA are going to be monitoring the chat for those questions and sending them to me. And as I look over a few, I do have a couple that I picked out that I thought would be helpful for us to just speak to. One question was just about the average time frame. So I guess I'll answer that because I can sort of speak to the statewide. It's around 6 to 8 weeks. It varies from region to region depending on volume. Another was a question around for folks who don't have online access, what options there are. So if Keith, maybe you want to answer that one real quick.
Sure. So Rob mentioned HCEC as a real great resource. And these are folks that you can actually call right on the phone, and they can help you in our office get to either one of our specialists, a homeless prevention specialists, who can help you fill out the application. We also actually have been open for different time periods, and by appointment only have helped people come in and fill out applications, and we're about to open up our offices again to do more of that. And our community partners have been doing similar things. So over the phone application support is something that we provide to folks who cannot do it online. And then we have been, and we plan to be opening up again in the very near future for by appointment only for folks who need to come in and fill them out in person.
Great, yeah, and I know other RAs are sending paper applications as needed in the mail. One other question that had come up, which was about folks who are undocumented. These programs are open to anyone, so documentation status should not be considered a barrier, and neither should public charge. Okay, so I've got a couple of questions that Eric's relayed to me. So let's see, is there still a need for cities and towns to fund their own local rental assistance programs to fill any gaps? That's a great question.
Of all this federal money, that has not necessarily been it hasn't been necessary as it was before, and we haven't identified any clear gaps where the local municipalities can get involved. So we're using those precious resources that they have for other needs, where the rental assistance here can really help in. And one of those focuses is homeowners that are also facing challenges going forward, where ERAP cannot help homeowners and IRMA might not fit.
Right. I would just, homeowners, I think is the opportunity. If there's an ability to do a local program right now, but agree with what Rob said there.
Great, thank you. I also see a question in the chat relating to landlords that need help in terms of housing stabilization. So can Keith, you were kind of the pilot experimenter on the landlord door. Can you maybe talk a little bit about that, and also just the sort of resources that are available for landlords?
Sure. So as hopefully more people know about today, landlords who are owned who have owned 20 units or less can initiate the application process for these emergency financial assistance programs. And so, as Stefanie was mentioning, we were one of the work DHE early on to pilot that and work with plenty of small landlords today to assist them, many of whom have some similar challenges with not being able to do online applications and other things. So we work closely with them to provide them with the paper applications, to provide them with assistance applying if they need that, or assistance completing the process. There's the application, there's the tenant consent, and then there's they're completing the process overall with the landlord. So, we provide that kind of support. We also do have provided trainings and other supports to landlord groups in the region to support them in helping their members be able to apply effectively. So those are some of the ways that we've worked with smaller landlords, many of whom own, a building or two, and haven't also had to use these programs in the past.
Great, thank you. So yeah, thank you so much, Taylor, for answering that question in the chat. I did see some mention about raft and the need for sort of housing instability. One thing I think we should just clarify is that if folks know that they, they've lost income or they've seen an increase in cost due to COVID, they don't actually have to wait until they are behind before they apply. That's one of the new things that I think is really important for folks to be aware of. All right, let's see what else we've got in the chat here. Can a home-based family apply for ERAP? That's another one that I think I might take. So right now, there are some policies being worked on relating to how home-based and ERAP can work together. And also there are there was language in the state budget this current fiscal year that allows that decouples raft and home-based and allows you to access both. But in terms of the details of kind of when and exactly, I think we would need to check with DHCD on that just to get clarification, or you can call your local REA to get clarification once those policies are finalized. Okay, well, I think we need to wrap up this portion and we can work with you all to answer some of those questions directly in the chat and follow up on some of the others. But thank you, everyone, for all of your questions. And Keith, Taylor, Rob, thank you so much for participating in this. Appreciate all of your time. You've got lots of people to serve and to get back to. Appreciate that again. Back to Chapa.
Thanks, Stefanie, and thank you to all of the panelists. It's great to listen in and hear from everyone. Our next speaker is going to talk about an exciting new program that is still in the pilot phase. It started a couple of weeks ago, being piloted. And our speaker is Cynthia Mohammed, who has been at Mass Housing Partnership since 1998, starting as a portfolio analyst and today serving as Director of Portfolio Management. So I will turn it over to Cynthia.
Thank you very much, Chris. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Chapa, for inviting me to speak about SHERA. I am going to let people know, if you don't already, I know I see a lot of familiar faces here, talk a little bit about what SHERA is, how people are eligible for SHERA, how it fits into this emergency rental assistance ecosystem, and also give an update on where we are currently with SHERA and the SHERA rollout. And if you have any time left over to answer it, I will answer any questions I can. I'm going to share my screen. I do have some slides prepared. And hopefully everyone can see my screen. Can I get a thumbs up? Thank you. Okay, so what is SHERA? SHERA stands for Subsidized Housing Emergency Rental Assistance. SHERA is a federally funded emergency rental housing assistance program for renters who have been impacted by COVID-19. SHERA will help clear rent arrearages or unpaid rent from the time starting from April 1st, 2020 through March 31st, 2021. Qualified owners of rent-restricted properties will be able to apply for assurance for assistance with rental arrearages on the accounts for all of their eligible tenants. SHERA is a collaboration between the state of Massachusetts and qualifying owners of housing with income-based rental subsidies. It is an owner-based portal. It is an owner-based online process that allows owners to apply for multiple tenants in one application. This is a program that leverages the income verification compliance work that is already taking place at these projects. And it really allows us to offer a streamlined process for eligible owners. In SHERA, eligible owners, again, are allowed to apply for assistance on behalf of their tenants with rental arrearages from April 2020 through March 31st of 2021. By applying for SHERA assistance, owners will continue their pledge not to evict tenants for non-payment of rent. This program is also intended to relieve some of the burden on the regional administering agencies and the ERAP Center who are administering the state's other emergency rental assistance programs, since tenants will not have to individually apply for assistance. And this is a big slide. So let's talk a little bit about owner and property eligibility criteria. So for owners to be eligible, they must meet the following criteria. For the first criteria is that they're either an existing mass housing or MHP borrower, or they're a local housing authority, or they have at least one property that is subject to use restrictions due to participation in a federal or state program and has 20 or more, and the property has 20 or more units. The second criteria is that the sponsor must be in good standing with MHP, Mass Housing, and DHCD. I will note that sponsors with properties that are in forbearance are still considered to be in good standing. Third criteria is that owners or their designated representatives, their property managers, must have at least 3 years compliance experience and at least one staff member holding certification in compliance training recognized by the affordable housing industry. And I will note that housing authorities are exempt from this requirement as administrators of public housing. And finally, owners must be willing to sign an agreement, the SHERA owner agreement. And I will note that as part of that agreement, owners agree not to evict residents receiving SHERA funds for at least 6 months after assistance is applied. Owners also agree to freeze rent for non-income-based rental units and to proactively engage tenants in other eviction prevention resources. And for property eligibility, the criteria is that a property has received state or federal subsidies for construction and or rehab of income-restricted housing, or the project currently receives project-based rental assistance under contracts administered by the Commonwealth or other state, public, or quasi-public agencies, and the project is subject to an annual audit. Let's talk a little bit about household eligibility. So for eligible owners and eligible properties, households must also be eligible. So a household has to have an income at or below 80% AMI. The household has to have experienced financial hardship due to COVID, either directly or indirectly. And again, the household must have rental arrears for the periods of April 2020 through March 31st of 2021. And so let's talk a little bit about how SHERA is being rolled out. As Chris mentioned, we are currently in the pilot phase. So the pilot phase is a group comes from a volunteer owner working group composed of both private and public owners with a diversity of geographic and property types. So phase after we're currently in pilot phase, we hope to open it up to phase 1 very soon. Phase 1 will be for mass housing and MHP borrowers. We will then move on to phase 2, which will open it up, the portal up to housing authority portfolios and the DHED soft subsidy portfolio. And finally, we will have a phase 3, which will open it up to Chapter 40B and Chapter 40R properties that weren't included in the previous 2 groups. And finally, I would like to share if anybody's interested in getting more information, to share the website for the SHERA portal. If you go to the portal and you go to the top right-hand side of the screen, there is a link that says program information. Once you click in there, there is a link to a page on mass.gov hosted by DHED. It's a terrific page where it has a whole bunch of information on the program. It has the policy guidance, it has the FAQs, it has the tenant-facing documents. There's a lot of information on the page. It has the trainings that we've done. So I have to report if you want to see some of the recordings that we've done with some of the trainings, that's all there on that page. And if you then have any further questions, you can reach out to us at shera@mass.gov. I will say that, question that we get a lot is, will this, right now this only covers can cover up to 12 months worth of arrearages. Will this be expanded? We hope so. After we do this first round of funding, we'll reevaluate, and if there's an opportunity for us to expand this program, we will do that. And so with that, that's the end of my presentation. I'll stop sharing my screen and maybe I can take some questions if there are any.
May have been extraordinarily clear and there are no questions. We can wait one more moment.
Or a lot of people have seen this before.
Well, people are also asking just about getting the slides, which is
okay, absolutely,
make everything available.
Absolutely.
Yes, so I think you're off the hot seat.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you.
I just want to this is Rachel Heller, CEO of CHAPA. I want to thank everyone for coming today. I especially want to thank Undersecretary Jennifer Maddox for speaking and telling us more about how the state has been handling the emergency and all the thought that they've been putting into getting this money, all this funding out and helping people stay stable in their homes. I want to thank Chris Norris for leading this and for opening it up, and Stefanie, Keith, Taylor, Rob, and Cynthia for providing this information. It was really helpful to learn how the programs have changed, the outreach that's being done, and the ways that everybody keeps adapting. I think Chris made a very important point at the beginning. We know that people were struggling with high housing costs before the pandemic started, and the pandemic has only exacerbated the challenges that people are experiencing. So we've obviously got to continue through this emergency and beyond this emergency to make sure that people are able to stay stable in their homes. They can get the help that they need. We all have to do our part to help people access these programs, learn, keep learning, keep adapting, keep changing. As Undersecretary Maddox said, failure is not an option. And I think Taylor made another really good point just about connecting people, seeing this as an opportunity to connect people to longer term stability and longer term resources. So while we work to help people through this emergency, we need to work on the long term solutions. We must emerge from this pandemic stronger. Our housing future really should be one that is more affordable, that is more accessible, it's more equitable, it's more sustainable. And so one way that you all can be part of that right now is through budget advocacy, which Stefanie mentioned in her comments. The Senate is in the middle of their budget process right now. And so you can advocate for long-term programs like Massachusetts Rental Voucher Program, Alternative Housing Voucher Program, Public Housing, RAFT. There's so many important programs that we've got, and this is an opportunity to advocate for them. And then I can't stress enough how much we need people to speak up in your own communities. We need more homes. We need more affordable homes. And you can be that voice in your community that says yes to housing. And we can both serve this long-term emergency and also ensure that people have the ability to have healthy, affordable homes in any community that they choose. So please visit CHAPA's website for information on the budget process, for our committees to get involved. We have a rental assistance committee if you'd like to get involved in that and help shape what our rental assistance programs look like across the state. So thank you again for joining today. We will be getting links out to this recording and also to the materials. Thank you very much.